Let me introduce you now to Andy Quinn on my left from the Embrace Project. We're going to talk about the Embrace Project a little bit more now. Andy Quinn is CEO of Father Hudson's Care, based in the Archdiocese of Birmingham, of course. Carol Hill, on my far right, is Director of Catholic Care in the Diocese of Leeds, and Mark Wiggin, CEO of Caritas Salford. So, Carol, if I may I start with you and talk a little bit about the Embrace Project and how you have a hope, really, of the ways in which this can be a great dividend for the parishes and the diocese. Okay.
Well, I want to start this evening by saying that I'm delighted to be launching the Reaching Out Toolkit, which is an excellent output from the Embrace Project. But before I actually do so, I wanted to set the scene a little and put this toolkit into context by sharing with you some of the highlights of the Embrace Project at a local level in parishes and local communities. And it's these highlights which form the heart of the toolkit, along with some of the lowlights, but we've converted those into useful tips so we don't all make the same mistakes again. So the remit of the Embrace Project was for parishes to reach out to their older people, both in their own parish and in the wider community. And we had open minds as to what activities should be undertaken. And in Leeds, we referred to these as initiatives. So the project gave volunteers in parishes the support and confidence to take action. We found that there was much enthusiasm, but often this could be diluted by perceived complexities around health and safety, safeguarding and training. Now, all of these are very important points, but it's also important to know that there are people within the church who can help, and it's all in the toolkit. Often, it is as simple as people just don't know where to start, and that's where the Embrace Project workers were so valuable. And now, all those experiences have been captured, and so going forward, the Reaching Out Toolkit will fulfill this role. Now, in my view, Embrace had some really novel projects, and over the 2 years that it ran, more than 20 projects and initiatives were started at local level. Who would have really thought that being between the three of us delivery partners, we could have come up with such a variety of different ways of giving older people those social connections that they really wanted? This was a real positive from the wide remit, and ultimately has provided a wealth of experience which is captured in the toolkit. As a church, we're very lucky that we have an abundance of social assets by way of church halls. They provide a warm and welcoming place for friendship groups, a place for people to chat over a cuppa and a cake, always the cake, listen to a talk from a local celebrity perhaps, and support each other in times of difficulty. Sadly, bereavement is all too common with our more elderly folk, but peer support from those who have experienced it is invaluable. Where there's no church hall, we found that the local pub became a valiant second best place, especially now the culture's changed, with tea and coffee very popular and widely available. And of course, if you're using that venue, there's minimal effort involved. Our breakfast club was very popular with older men. Now, anecdotally, I stress, men are not generally renowned for their idle chit-chat, something us female counterparts have developed into a fine art. But in a comfortable surrounding, with a breakfast and a selection of the daily papers, they were more than happy. Our lunch at the Lion Group also proved very popular, especially as it included people from the local care home. Now, many older people do not cook regular hot meals for themselves. Perhaps it's due to affordability of both food and fuel, or they find it too physically demanding, or sadly, they simply can't be motivated to do so. So having a luncheon group in a pub easily provides this opportunity. And the neutral venue, so to speak, also had the advantage of being more inclusive and perhaps more inviting to the local community, who may on occasion be intimidated by a church hall. Perhaps the highlight of Embrace in the Leeds Diocese was the Making Memories film. This was an intergenerational project between a group of afternoon tea ladies and gentlemen and the pupils of the local Catholic high school. Both groups were a bit shy at first when they first met, but they soon made great friendships. The older people visited the school, a building many of them had not been in for the last 60 years when they left it, and they soon started to relive times gone by. They were shown the computer suite and introduced to educational games, something the young take for granted, but proved quite challenging for the older generation, especially the mouse, a very hard concept for them. One of the more poignant get-togethers was the sharing of each other's first Holy Communion photographs. In some ways, these were so similar, yet in others, so different. This intergenerational initiative also allowed for dementia awareness sessions to be delivered in school, which is immensely valued to the whole community and had an impact on the views of the old people on the young and the young on the old. So what did we learn from the project at a local level? Well, getting the right volunteer or contact in the parish was crucial to the success of the initiative. You really do need someone with a can-do attitude. These low-cost initiatives did have positive benefits on all those involved, the older people and the volunteers. The intergenerational project was, I have said, the real highlight. And at Catholic Care in Leeds, we've replicated this in slightly different ways a number of times since the end of the Embrace project. And working together, sharing experiences and learning from colleagues and other organisations also proved valuable. And before I finish, I just want to share with you a couple of quotes that some of the people said. I enjoy meeting people. We do a lot of laughing. We have fun, and I've made new friends. I've made friends with people from church who I've seen in passing for 50 years and didn't know. The support shared is invaluable. There's a sense of caring and sharing, and the cakes are lovely. And simply, it's the highlight of my week. So the overriding learning point for me was the value of older people to our parish community and society generally. They have so much to offer, including a wealth of experience. After all, what is age? It's just a number. So now I can say that the Reaching Out Toolkit is officially launched. Now, I may be slightly biased in my opinion, but I think the toolkit is excellent. I started on this project at its inception almost 6 years ago. But I really do feel that it's such a user-friendly guide, and it can inspire social action in parishes across England and Wales to enhance the lives of older people living in our communities. And I think this is an excellent opportunity for the Church, through its lay people, to support its older congregation through social action.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Lots of good ideas there, and so good to hear the benefits that people are receiving, but also the degree to which it's empowering lay people and boosting confidence. And what I'd really like to hear from you, Andy, is a bit more about the collaboration that's been happening in these areas.
Okay. When it comes to the creative arts, the hope is that in the created object, one would hope to find some characteristics of the creator. I know that as human beings, we hope that there is something of the divine within us that enables us to dare to refer to ourselves as the children of God. So in this created object, which Carol has spoken about, reaching out, is it possible to discern anything of the creators who work together on it? And I think if you were to put the light of this project through a prism, there'd be three very strong colours that would emerge. And one is the number of sayings and speeches from the popes, the most recent popes, and also from recent saints that are positive about that period of our lives. That is sometimes referred to as old age, which in no way captures the possibilities of that period. If we think of Cézanne and what he achieved in that period of his life. Then the second strand, the second light that I think you'd see coming through the prism is a number of references to other agencies beyond the church. This is a Catholic project, but if you look into this, it's the gift that keeps giving, because there are references to other organisations, vintage communities, Church Urban Fund. I've got a list of them here. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Linking Lives. It just keeps giving. Now, I have difficulty with that term if you look beyond the church, because in a sense, the church is always out there collaborating with anyone with a similar vision and agenda. The third light that emerges is the absolute centrality of the 10 local projects, Catholic initiatives or Catholic-founded collaborative projects with others that are described in this. They're like 10 windows into beautiful areas of work. In fact, rather than windows, they're more like stained glass windows, because the image will stay in your mind when you see whether it's a local pub where the landlord realised he had to put in a ramp to make it accessible for the group that wanted to meet there, or whether it's the project in Worcester where the group worked with the local council, Talk to Me Worcester, to try and get better neighbourliness going. So they're the three strands, I think. Now, in terms of collaboration, I can say that if we hadn't worked together, even though we've got a lot going on in our own diocese that I'm very proud of, the truth is I've learned so much from what goes on in Caritas, Salford, and in Catholic Care Leeds. We have learned from that and will continue to learn from that. Working with Clive and Phil from CSAN has demonstrated to us the importance of having a coordinating body who will see a project through and who will cope with the diversity of those three direct delivery organisations. And I have to praise their ability to complete the project. 10 edits it may have taken, but that's what they have brought. And then I can say for myself, after this is published, if we hadn't worked together, I don't think I would have the courage to try and move this on in our own diocese. And I'll go back in the new year and try and ensure that this is used in married parishes and deaneries because of the courage you get from working together. And I suppose even in our own diocese, the person we employed to do this work, he had an approach that was different to the one that we usually use with older people. Much more volunteer-led, much more open to working with the whole community and other organisations. Even though we're very collaborative, he stretched our horizons. And so finally, I want to say that this project took a lot of time and generosity. Initially, it took the generosity of Mark there and Carol to work with the possible funder Porticus to fund this work. They gave so much time to that. At Father Hudson's, I would say, once the implementation was going, we dedicated the time of Christie to help draw the workers together at regular meetings and to chair that. That was our gift. And I think the gift of CSAN was the time they put in to completing this work. And I thank Clive particularly for that. Going forward, as a church, I think we have learned that there are, from this project, a few things. We've underestimated the time it takes to set up a project like this. And we know that in the future, if we do something like this collaborating, if the funders won't fund that time at the beginning, it will be up to the agencies and the church to see if it will fund that time. Because it takes so long to prepare to deliver a good project. There's a lot of talking, sharing, praying that has to go on. And then once it starts in the implementation stage, you have to have somebody who will dedicate the time, as Christy did with us, to drawing people together regularly, because it's a lonely time out there working, and you need to share good practice. And I suppose finally, I would want to say to the church, structurally and prophetically, it has to be committed to recognising the inalienable dignity of people in that period of their lives. We have to be prepared to validate the dignity of that person by devoting prayer, time, energy, and money to ensure that dignity. I know before I popped in here tonight, I went to the National Gallery and I was looking in one of the rooms there, the Impressionist room, for a picture of an older person. There was one older person on the wall. There was next to the famous painting of the Bathers. And that was one, the only reason it was on the wall was because of its creator, Cézanne. And it was of an old woman holding her beads. A very serious painting. Now, the church is in the same position. Are we prepared to put an older person in that period of their life on our walls? Or will they be left out of the room and all the paintings will be young people and beautiful people and rich people? We have that choice as a church. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So we've now been joined, as you can see, by Lynn Murray on my right-hand side, who's Chief Operating Officer for the Diocese of Clifton in Bristol. You're Chair of the Financial Secretaries Group and also a Trustee of the Catholic Trust for England and Wales. So Lynn, if I may just start with you, I'd like to know what has struck you most so far by what you've heard and how it touches you in your context.
Okay. I think, first of all, it's really highlighted to me the issue that we have around care for our elderly, which is the negative side of things. But I want to focus on what I found really encouraging was really the last section that we've just gone through, talking about the Embrace project and what we can now do going forward. I think within the church, we work together collaboratively, and I think we can just build on that. And this is an opportunity to do that. I'm excited to see the toolkit. Certainly within our Diocese of Clifton, I think that's something that we can really utilise. And I think it's about empowering our parishes to feel that they have the ability to go out to not just the providers of Catholic care, so the other residential homes and providers, and share the Catholic ethos. So I think we should look at this in a positive light.
Well, Catholic care is such a precious gift for society at large. And Mark, I'd like to know from you, really, whether you have this sense that it is being broadcast, in the true sense of the word, of seeds being sown in these different communities.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think one of the important things for me is going back to some of the things we've talked about earlier, mention of Pope Francis, about being missionary disciples, reaching out into the communities. And we've heard in my view, that the role of the laity is such an important one, that we are the inheritors of the work of the religious. And some of the things that we need to do is actually get our adult formation sorted a lot more, in the sense that Catholic social teaching at the heart of parishes, helping parishes to organise themselves, reach out to other people. So I'm very encouraged by the amount of people of goodwill that join the SVPs, for example, that join other organisations to do things. But there's also a very, very large group of sleeping Catholics, should I say, who are not in the churches, but their children are in our Catholic schools. Our communities are full of people who've been brought up through that formation in schools. And I think we've got to find ways of activating that group of people. And I think one of the things that I've been learning lately is that we need to do things together, but not just as a Catholic community together, which is rather inward looking, but reaching out. And a little example from the Embrace project that I could share with you on that is that, and I'm looking at a few of our staff and colleagues in here, but reaching out, for example, in Manchester to youth and community workers in the black community who are dealing with knife crime, who are also then working with their elderly in their churches, in their Episcopal churches and in their other fields, but working alongside them and getting our staff to organise with Age Concern, the local authority, the black and ethnic minority communities, bringing them together, for example, to things like vintage tea parties where people are sort of jiving from the 50s and things like that. And it's that sort of thing of bringing the wider Catholic community into that family of other people beyond just the Catholic community. And I think to do that, we've got to, in a way, look at how we have a faith formation at the moment that stops at the age of about 13 or 14 after you've had your confirmation. And we've got to look at how we can do that. And I was listening to Cardinal Vincent Nichols here about the history of the Catholic Church. And one of the things that I'm struck by is that when the Catholic Church re-established itself in this country many, many years ago, one of the first things that it did was build its schools as places of formation for young people. And for me, I think what's really important is reaching out through those schools, but putting the same energy into a massive issue that we've got of older people, in the same energy that we put into creating schools 100 odd years ago to reach out to communities. We've got that capacity. We've just got to try and find that excitement to do that again.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? That is a wonderful vision that you've just evoked. Catherine, how do you think what you're hearing would play out with the participants in the surveys that you conducted, the conversations that you've had with people? You've largely been giving a voice to the voiceless. How might that sort of vision read with them?
I think we certainly heard when we went to parishes that people were a little, I felt there was sometimes distance from understanding what the experience was like. But I also felt I also heard that people wanted to do something beyond their church walls. And I mean, I've put the quote up, but I've really felt that people were paralysed. And one of the chaps in the focus group, he told me about some volunteering he did with the homeless community. And he lit up and you could see the energy that he'd experienced in doing that work. And he talks about it being this win-win. And he wished that more people had the opportunity to do it.
Because anyone who volunteers soon realises that you go anticipating that you're going to do someone some good, but actually you realise you're getting it back in spades, don't you?
Right.
There's always this virtuous circle. Yeah.
But I think sometimes everything feels so outsourced. We've siloed everything, we outsource everything.
So people need easy conduits into doing what they feel naturally they've got gifts to offer.
I think somehow we forget that we are just meeting another human and we are humans, and sometimes people feel they have to be very specialist. And we don't. We're humans, we're meeting other humans, and we just need a bit more support, it seems, to do some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter Kevin, can you just outline for us a little bit what the report says about working in a more unified way going forward?
I'm not sure I remember.
Well, I can certainly give you a prompt in terms of a kind of way. Well, take care homes, for example. You've got Methodist Homes for the Aged, you've got homes run by the Salvation Army. By far, a greater proportion of homes are actually run by different Catholic charities and religious institutions. And yet, you hear of MHA and Salvation Army belonging to certain forums, but it doesn't seem to happen in the same way with Catholic care homes.
I think there's a particular sort of historical issue here, which is, we were talking about this just before this evening kicked off, actually, that a lot of care homes and residential provision particularly, but also some at-home provision, it had its origins in religious communities, which were absolutely wonderful. And they had their own organisations. And of course, a lot of these sat slightly outside diocesan structures, not in any sort of disobedient way, but because of the way they were organised.
Just the history.
Yeah. And as these shrunk, quite a lot of their work ended up being taken over by charities, which were often very small charities. And we found out on a day we had at Father Hudson's, which was put on by CSAN, one of the issues with that is that a lot of people are doing great work, but on a very small scale and quite dislocated from others, which means that there is some fantastic work. But actually, if you look at the CQC reports, there's also some quite dodgy work going on. And it's just that there's not an opportunity, actually, Catherine, you picked this up as well, didn't you? There's not an opportunity for people to learn from each other. So I think there's a proximal issue here, which is, I'm convinced that there'll be economies of scale, but also great opportunities for learning if those little isolated pockets of good practice could somehow be connected up in the same way, and possibly in connection with MHA. We've got a representative from MHA or Salvation Army or something. So that's one part of it. But the other thing that's been coming through tonight, what Mark said and what Sister Monica said earlier, actually, and of course yourself, Catherine, was I think there's room for a bit of joined-up thinking, which is that Catholic organisations can be great at doing what they're doing, and Catholic laity in the parishes can be doing fantastic things. But they don't necessarily have a very clear way of explaining why they're doing what they're doing, or how it fits into the bigger vision of what it is to be a Catholic Christian in a secular society in the 21st century.
Why does that matter?
And I think it matters because, well, some of this is just my own stuff coming out now, but I'm becoming increasingly concerned that as a secular society, we've been parasitic on Christian values for quite a long time. I don't think that that's going to continue for much longer. I think in our political discourse and in our discourse around care, we're losing contact with some of the Christian virtues that actually drove it for a long time. I think Catholic care, and Christian care generally, but Catholic care is going to become increasingly distinct from the standard welfare state provision. And we've got something important to offer, but we need to be able to articulate it, and we need to get it into the places that it matters.
And yet we've got CQCs that are now saying, actually, people's religious and spiritual needs have to be logged, they have to be catered for. So we've got a wonderful opportunity.
We have a fantastic opportunity.
Actually, in a way, the secular world is a step ahead.
Well, it's given us space to do that.
Works,
it's saying, give us something to work with here. Because, spiritual care in care settings, in general care settings, it tends to be generic, and it tends to be, frankly, a little bit silly. It tends to be about, if we give her a Bible, or can somebody come in and sing some hymns, and that will keep her quiet. We can do better than that. And I think the opportunity is there for us to do better, but it does require us to start thinking more reflectively, and dare I say it, more theologically, about why we do what we do and why it matters.
Yeah, and help people in this vocation to grow old that Francis was talking about, Pope Francis. I'd really like to open it out to the audience now. I don't know the logistics of roving microphones or what. Marvellous, a man in the wings with a roving mic. We've just got, 5 minutes or so, but I'd love to take 2 or 3 questions, but please do use this opportunity to ask a question of our panellists who have such a wealth of experience. Rather than making a statement, I'd like a question from you. Anybody who'd like to start? Yes, lady in the row, just at the back there. Who'd you like to address this to particularly?
Can I address it to Peter, please?
To Peter, yeah.
So I was really struck by what you were saying again about the vocation at that period of life. And if I could quickly share an anecdote, but my granny did the Camino de Santiago when she was 70, and now is 80 and still meets up with the people to walk across Europe with the people that she met. And I think there's something deeply sacramental in that. And I would like to kind of hear about, I suppose, your vision for what that period of life might look like, and calling people, I suppose, beyond the oppression that we see at the moment. If that's okay.
That's great, thank you. I think I'm still sort of inspired. I'm working with what Francis said about actually, we've never been in this situation before. The people who need to tell us what spirituality is in their 80s and 90s are the people who are living through it. They're the spiritual pioneers. And we've kind of got to grow into an awareness of that. There is a guy called Erickson who suggested that there's a period, he did a sort of periods of later life, and he suggested that there is a sort of a state of what he called gerotranscendence, which is when you can let go of a lot of the nonsense and you can simply be present before God and before others in a non-judgmental way, which doesn't expect anything of anybody, and that might be just where you want to be. But I'm hesitant to suggest that that's what people have to do, because that becomes another sort of expectation that slightly younger people are putting on older people at that stage. I think we really need to sort of recognise that these are the experts, these are the spiritual pioneers, and they're going to have to tell us what it is.
And but indeed there may be a spiritual dividend in the fact that there is going to be such a preponderance of older people, but they have to be role models for us. They have to be the sort of people.
Absolutely.
I mean,
And they can
Elizabeth
tell us how to
McKinley
live
talks
our
about the tasks of aging. I remember being at a training session in Newcastle and someone stood up at the back and said, "Oh, Debbie, tasks of aging. I thought this was all about retirement and taking it easy." No, there is no retirement from being a Christian, as I think you said. Yes, the lady there.
Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm one of the trustees of CSAN, and so I've accompanied this process. And I suppose I have two questions, which are kind of linked, and I see Mark's face looking. One goes back to our learnings of David Cameron's language around big society, which we have always been. We are big society, and the Catholic Church could teach a lot about big society and what that meant. And the Pope talked to us in the Day of the Poor, in his message for the Day of the Poor, about being the saints next door. And I think that's exactly what we've been describing around being those volunteers and being there. But I think there are two questions that come to me from what's being said, which I think have kind of been lost as we've moved along. Whilst it's really important to get the energy from the saints next door and their involvement and volunteering. To do this well, it takes money. And that money is about animation, it's about enabling. There is a win-win for those people who are being helped to engage, but there is an issue about money. And the other question is whether or not we have the confidence and the political nous to challenge the systems that are actually making it more oppressive for older people to have a quality of life. Because my question for us would be, if we don't, who will?
Okay, so we need energy amongst the laity volunteering doing these things, but we also need the energy to challenge the status quo and to find the money. So, Mark, you seem to be addressing that to Mark.
I've had conversations about money before, but for me, I think what's really important is getting this combination that if you want to be in the square politically and delivering, you've got to be good at it. And you only need to look at Catholic schools to realise they're in the square, the political square, they're good at what they do. If you want to be in the square on work with older people, you've got to be good at what you do. And to be good at what you do needs a combination, in my view, of two things. You've got to deliver professionally, and that costs money. And therefore, you've got to look at your contracts with people. You've got to have some political will to say, no, I'm not going to be paying my staff under the real living wage, etc., for things. I'm not going to take a local authority contract that is doing the care worker in and not training them, as we've seen. So you've got to have that. You've got to be professional about what you do. But the huge thing about the Catholic Church is the voluntarism of caring and giving, and you need to put the two together. And for me, the organisations that are in this room, like Father Hudson's here and Catholic Care, Caritas Westminster, all these other organisations and groups, they are the professional safety net that I see that can actually provide the professionalism to support the voluntarism. And the toolkit that we've got today that we're celebrating and promoting is exactly that. It's saying, let's have the professionals in the background looking after health and safety, looking after safeguarding, etc., and let's have the volunteers out there. But all of that still needs money. So my thing is you need a mixed economy. You need some professional delivery of service, and you've got to be competitive to get that. And you've got to be organised to get that. And then at the same time, you can then support your volunteers to bring a huge added value to what you're doing. And that's how I see it in a nutshell. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I think you've come from rugby and wanted to ask a question, particularly around working ecumenically.
Yes, I'm from the Gift of Years Rugby, which is one of the organisations affiliated to the Anna Chaplaincy Network. And I do very much work ecumenically with all of the churches in Rugby to provide ecumenical chaplaincy to the residential care homes in Rugby. And I just wanted to ask the panel, the team who are speaking today, whether you see any value really in moving forward in the ways that you're talking from a place where you've been speaking about the decline of religious orders and of the traditional ways that you've been working, whether you see a way forward in working ecumenically with other churches in order to be able to have many more resources to draw on, many more people, and also something that Peter was saying about the how we really express our Christian values and ethos in the very secular environments that we work in, and how we can stand together with our brothers and sisters from other churches in order to articulate this care, this very deep relational care, which you've been speaking about tonight, and which is very much in the hearts and minds of our brothers and sisters from other churches as well.
Andy, do you see this as an advantage, working ecumenically, or do you just see a lot of problems surfacing in the process?
No, problems in what I'd see. I think some of our best work, certainly in the community, is ecumenical. So our work on homelessness, for example, it would be up there in that area. And I know in our care home in Coleshill, we have had some ecumenical chaplaincy over time, but there's not at the moment, and we would like there to be more of that. And I also think, just generally in community work, some more multi-faith work would be an area we should move into. One of my concerns is that at the moment, certainly in the residential sector, we're not talking even enough to each other as Catholic care providers. And that worries me more, that where sometimes it can seem it's easier to talk ecumenically than across. And I think that goes back to a previous question where we were kind of asked, do we have the courage to challenge? And if you're not talking to each other and achieving some one voice approach, then you're not going to challenge anyone. And sadly, by not talking to each other, which would be in a sense very cheap, by not talking to each other, it's very costly for the future of our work in this area. So my big hope really going forward is that those who are providing these individual slots of excellent Catholic care, however that's defined, would find ways of coming together more, because we're not competitors with each other. We are carrying something that is sacred and could be lost. And I know, I don't know how often the word crisis has been used tonight, but I know that one of the things in care in time is that we need to recognise it is a crisis. It was recognised many years ago in a previous report, but now it really is. And as Peter says, society at large may be losing those elements of Christianity or Christian values that have guided some of the better work. And we have to be careful that we don't lose the ethos that was referred to earlier. And the only way of keeping that, I think, responding to a crisis, rather than flight, is fight. And by coming together and struggling together, I think we can do that.
Which leads us very nicely into the concluding remarks from Philip McCarthy. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I think we've heard some wonderful things tonight, and things that I've come away with, just to summarise, are words from Peter at the start about the need to celebrate and the elderly in our society, and the importance of the journey, the ongoing journey through life into God's grace. From Catherine, we heard about the importance of presence, particularly provided by the religious sisters over the years, and the importance of caring for carers. And from Sister Monica, we heard about the importance of passing on the ethos, which is so important, that heart can speak to heart and how I can turn to we. From Cardinal Vincent, we heard something about the challenges of isolation and the difficulties of achieving sustainability, but also about the resources that we have as Catholics, so spiritual, community, and in the institutions, and the importance of seeing the elderly people as a treasure. And as I get older, I certainly agree with that more and more. And it's been great to hear about the Embrace project, which I've been involved with over the last few years, and from my colleagues who've worked so hard on it, and finally brought it together tonight to launch this toolkit. So thank you very much to them. And really just the last few words of thanks to you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the speakers. Thanks to the audience, and thanks particularly to my team who have worked so hard, not only on the Embrace project, and particularly I must mention Clive, but also worked so hard to turn this event around. As you know, we were supposed to be in Parliament. It was supposed to be quite a different event, and over a 3-day period, they completely turned it around to end up with the success that we've had tonight. So thank you very much, particularly to Clive, Isabella, and to Anna. And just 3 things to take away. First, do consider how the collaboration that we've heard about, particularly and expressed so eloquently there from Andy at the end, can be achieved. There's some practical steps here which I'm sure we could take. Please take away the publications which will be available for you to take away, a leaflet about the toolkit and also the document itself. And please do stay and eat and drink with us tonight and enjoy the end of the evening.